Assassin's Creed Shadows and their parent company Ubisoft are about to enter what can only be described as a whirlwind of opinions, backlash, and coverage once Shadows releases soon. The game has been mired in controversy and has made so much trouble behind the scenes that at this point, the simple fact that it's releasing at all is commendable in being a win for Ubisoft that they were even able to get this thing out the door. However, like most progressive companies, they are usually only pushing virtuous concepts and talking points for one simple reason, which is because they, like many a male feminist, usually have skeletons in their closets. This is why you'll never hear me say that I'm a feminist, but it's also cause, unlike Ubisoft, I don't hide my distaste for things behind virtuous smokescreens. This brings us to this article from France24.com. Ubisoft trial justice lifts the veil on years of sexual and moral harassment. Sexist, racist, or homophobic insults, constant humiliation. 3 former senior executives will explain themselves from Monday before the Bobigny Criminal Court on the systematic sexual and moral harassment that they are accused of having carried out within Ubisoft French video game giant. Indeed. It turns out that the company that has been pushing for plenty of diversity and female representation was actually at the core of their being a sexist hellhole that's full of predators. Who could have saw this coming? Well, everyone in fact. It's literally always like this. It's like when you hear a guy who says that he's a male feminist, that's code for he's likely a predator who just wants access to women's spaces. Only weirdo men are feminists. Be a misogynist, like a real man, that's what I say. Jokes aside, but this report zeroes in on 3 key Ubisoft figures. These 3 guys are named Sergei Hascot, Thomas Francois, and Guillaume, I can't say his name, Guillaume Patru. Why do the French have such weird names, man? Anyways, Thomas Francois legit sounds like a porn star name. But when I read what this guy has done to people at Ubisoft, it's kinda crazy actually. Allegedly, according to what's said here, Thomas Francois would play pornos in the Ubisoft offices with the loudspeakers blaring so that all the employees would hear it while they work. He would also allegedly run around the Ubisoft offices, open-mouth kissing random female employees at random and play a game that's called Cat and Dick. And before you ask me what that game entails, I genuinely don't know, but this guy just sounds like a Saturday cartoon villain the more I read about him. Tommy Francois would also yell at female employees and call them things like SLUTs, and at one point demanded that a female employee do a handstand on a desk while wearing a skirt so that he could see her panties, I guess. Like I said, this guy just kind of reads like a menace. It doesn't even stop there, and again, these people and more, they were in charge of stuff like Assassin's Creed. And this is just more of a reason why Ubisoft just kind of needs to be wiped off the face of the map if you ask me. Oh, and I wasn't done, by the way, with Tommy Boy's accusations. At one point, he tied that same female employee that was doing handstands on a chair, and then he put her in an elevator and sent her to another floor without the ability to free herself, and no, I'm not kidding, that is what the report genuinely says. He also smeared felt tip pen on this female employee's face and drew all over her and then forced her to attend a meeting without having the chance to wash Francois' drawings off of her face. Tommy also is being prosecuted because he tried during a company Christmas party to forcibly kiss a younger female employee that, get this, other Ubisoft employees held this female employee down who clearly didn't want to kiss him so that he could swap spit with her. Francois would also, as this report states, he would encourage his subordinates to act in the same way, using in particular his aura and his high hierarchical position within the company to this end. So essentially, he would try to create a culture of literal chaos for his employees to ensure that his actions were normalized because others below him were doing the same thing. Again, these people work at Ubisoft and made stuff like Shadows and more, so when you hear Ubisoft say, "Oh, we just want this game to respect these people or women in general," just know that they're lying to you. But I'm not done, fellas, it gets worse, we're just getting started. This then brings us to Sergei Hascot. He was removed from his position at Ubisoft in 2020 and has been placed on leave while he has been investigated since then. Sergei, by the way, was the chief creative officer at Ubisoft. Pretty much his job entailed that any game Ubisoft was making had to pass his eyes while it was being pitched or made to ensure that it met his quality standards first. And he's been with Ubisoft for a really long time and helped shepherd series like Assassin's Creed and more over the years. Well, turns out Sergei's a little bit of a closeted racist, and yeah, let's get back to that report now. After there was an attack in 2015 by pro-Islamic nationalists, Sergei allegedly demanded that an Islamic Ubisoft female employee confirmed to him personally if she supported those attacks or not. Likely, if she did say yes, he would then fire her on the spot. Also, during the month of Ramadan, which is when Muslim people fast during the day, allegedly Sergey would leave, and no, I'm not kidding, and he would leave pork and bacon on this employee's desk and would change her wallpaper on her work computer to a bacon sandwich when she left Ubisoft. Like, this is all so absurd, dude. How are these people somehow more cartoon villains than what you can find in fiction today? Sergey allegedly also has a laundry list of both sexual and moral harassment which has spanned years while working at Ubisoft as well, allegedly. To say the company is cooked with these allegations, that's an understatement, but this now brings us to the third defendant in this case. The 39-year-old whose name I just can't pronounce, Guillaume Petru, who I will just simply call Petru from now on, okay? And the only picture I could find of this guy was on his LinkedIn as shown here, but regardless, this guy worked on stuff like Zombie U, Red Steel 2, Assassin's Creed Bloodlines, The Crew, Watch Dogs, and more. He's also being prosecuted for tons of harassment, most of it being morality-based, no signs of sexual deviance like the other two supervillains, but still. According to the joint report, dozens of witnesses came forward confirming that these three guys at Ubisoft were indeed treating the company's employees like personal playthings. The reason why many didn't initially report this were due to it as being stated here. A large number gave up on filing a complaint for fear of reactions from the video game industry. So the employees were afraid if they did say anything, they would actually just get blacklisted from the industry, which is definitely wrong and not okay. The victims also stated that the Assassin's Creed Shadows publisher had their pleas fall on deaf ears, as this says here. The inertia of human resources, despite being alerted to this behavior, still did not act or try to change the environment at Ubisoft even though they had ample evidence. The victims also claimed that Ubisoft manipulated, exhausted, and crushed these employees into the pavement if they tried to stand up for themselves and call out the destructive behavior within. And one of the 9 people who have filed a civil lawsuit against Ubisoft and their higher-ups states that this employee was subjected to multiple humiliating acts and remarks which caused significant psychological repercussions. And despite pleading to HR, their voice was silenced and their cries were deafened so no one would stand up to help them. Sergey, the former chief creative officer, in his statement says that he categorically denies having harassed a single one of his colleagues. He denies having any knowledge of reprehensible acts committed by various Ubisoft employees. As of right now, these cases are ongoing, but it paints the picture that Ubisoft is undoubtedly cooked behind the scenes when they have such accusations and trials about their company and how they treat their employees coming so close to Shadows releasing. Or the fact that Ubisoft added a Japanese deity in a real-life piece of art in Japan and referred to it as a scarecrow, when in reality it is, as this post reads here, the statue of Akita Prefecture's guardian deity Kashima-sama is treated as just a big scarecrow and ornament in a work set in the Kansai region. It's like they're not even doing any research anymore. Again, at this point, nothing really surprises me when it comes to Ubisoft. The level of care they have for trying to preserve what Japan is just makes everything worse when it's placed up against reality. But it's not surprising that a company that claims that it's progressive is actually, in fact, not progressive at all. And like always, the ones who claim to not be racist and to want equality are always the ones using these terms to game the system in their favor. Why do you think these weirdos care so much about race and gender? Because that's all they see each other for anyways. Also, ask yourself this question: if gender and genitals don't define who you are, then why do these types believe removing or adding them to themselves will affirm them? Just food for thought, but you know, moving on. And when Grums brought up the Japanese deity being reduced to a scarecrow, which if you want a comparison, imagine if Assassin's Creed Mirage took the Prophet Muhammad and then turned him into a punching bag with his face on it. Yeah, pretty much the same thing here. But if you call that out, you're a grifter, and that's exactly what happened to Grums. People attacked him for simply saying that Japanese people just shouldn't be given common decency, but Ubisoft fanboys don't really care. As Bumburi Odo says here, the replies to this are just full of people who don't care. Grums is objectively correct about Ubisoft not doing their research and not caring about Japan. All the fanboys really just want a Japan-style theme park to vandalize, and that's really what it is. It seems as though the very fanboys of Ubisoft are just like those executives. They only really care about progressive themes or being respectful to certain cultures if it benefits them in some way, but once it gets in the way of their bias or enjoyment, they just conveniently toss it away. It's why, in my opinion, Ubisoft has no real moral ground to stand on here. Claiming their game is authentic when it isn't and then claiming that their company protects their employees when it's anything but that. But Geralt of Gunia shared this tweet from Jason Schreier, who back in July 2020 reported on the misconduct allegations against Ubisoft, where he said this too. Among many details I learned while reporting this piece, the developers of Assassin's Creed Odyssey wanted Cassandra to be the only playable lead. But Ubisoft's marketing team and creative lead, Sergei Housecoat, wouldn't allow it. Women don't sell, they said. I mean, he's not entirely wrong despite his accusations. Because when you look up who was played more in Odyssey, it was overwhelmingly Alexios over that of Cassandra. As this article, all the way back in 2018 stated, it turns out that players chose Alexios way more than Cassandra. The director of the game said that during the playtest before Odyssey launched, of course, their testers chose the heroes at a more even 50-50 split. But once the game actually released, about 66% or 2/3 of Odyssey's player base chose Alexios over Cassandra ultimately. And again, we have to admit that despite Cassandra or even female Eivor technically being the canon main characters of their games, that despite this, both Odyssey and Valhalla, when initially revealed, were marketed with male leads not only in their CGI trailers, but on the covers of the games too. So while I'm not defending the former chief creative officer for his alleged misconducts behind the scenes in Ubisoft, he is right in the sense that yes, having male character options do in fact cause your game to sell better more often than they don't. And I think this is a big reason why people are annoyed with Shadow specifically, because you're not really able to choose male or female for Noway specifically. But I did report on that a while ago, where I was told by someone at Ubisoft that the devs that were essentially there were butthurt that players kept choosing male over female in all their games. So they purposely ensured that Noway could only be female to effectively force the players into playing as a woman. This then also brings me to this from Bounding into Comics. Japanese politician calls on National Diet to condemn Ubisoft and Assassin's Creed Shadows over in-game ability to destroy real-world Shinto shrine. Can we really excuse this just because it's a game? The shrine in question, which is called Harima no Kuni Soja and is located in Japan's Hyōgo Prefecture, can be destroyed in the game. But of course, you could not in fact destroy, say, anything religious in Assassin's Creed Mirage, but that's because Ubisoft knew if they were to let the player desecrate Islamic holy sites, it would be grounds for massive backlash. But I guess not giving Japan the same level of care is fine. These double standards are all over, I know. This then was said by Hyōgo Prefecture Assembly member Takeshi Nagase, who spoke on the shrine and Ubisoft's general uncaring nature for Japan's customs and traditions. He said, and I quote, "Today I would like to talk about how the hearts of us Japanese people are being trampled upon. Have you heard of the game Assassin's Creed Shadows? Created by the French game company Ubisoft, this game unfolds its story using real Japanese shrines and temples as its setting. The shrines and Buddhist temples depicted in the game's background are all faithfully recreated in CG, accurately reflecting their current appearance. The game also beautifully portrays seasonal changes and other details with great skill. However, the problem lies in the storyline. The protagonist of this game behaves in an extremely violent and outrageous manner, attacking passing monks with a sword and shooting arrows at people for no reason. The biggest issue in this game's depiction is the Harima no Kuni Soja shrine in Himeji City. In the game, this shrine's main hall serves as a key location for the protagonist's actions. However, the protagonist is shown barging in with shoes on, decapitating people, and committing unspeakable atrocities, including destroying sacred mirrors and causing complete havoc. To us, such scenes are unthinkable. Can we really excuse this just because it's a game? Can we dismiss it as entertainment? Rights that are not asserted will be lost. If something is offensive or unacceptable, we must clearly express our objections. Japan is actively engaging with many foreign visitors, working to increase inbound tourism, but not everything about internationalism is positive. We must clearly state what is unacceptable. The government, local politicians like us, and most importantly, our National Diet members must raise our voices on this issue. We bear responsibility to uphold the dignity of our nation and its traditions." End quote. Takeshi also spoke to a caretaker of that very shrine that you can destroy in Shadows, and they said this: "Well, this shrine is a place that represents Japanese culture. Seeing such images being spread around is first and foremost deeply regrettable. There are people who come to pray here every day. If those people saw such scenes, it would surely disturb and sadden them. When I think about that, it's truly heartbreaking. But then if you bring this up on Twitter, you'll just be swarmed by people that will just call you a grifter." When we know the only reason they don't actually care is because at the end of the day, they simply do not value the voices of Japanese people specifically, or really care to respect their culture. But if you were to insult theirs, then there would be hell to pay, of course. This overall sentiment at downplaying or claiming that Japanese culture in general is inferior is nothing new, sadly. I mean, the games industry in general has been very much making fun of Japanese games and their developers for a very long time, even back in the days of like X-Play on G4 Tech TV even. This also reminds me when Makoto Goto, who is a designer on Final Fantasy XIII as well as many other games, was at a panel where the people who were a part of the movie, Indie Game the Movie to be specific, which includes people like Phil Fish, who made the game Fez, Jonathan Blow, who made Braid and The Witness, and the creator of Super Meat Boy, Edmund McMillen. Now, listen to how much these devs who felt that they were superior to Japanese gaming way back then, this was, by the way, more than 10 years ago, and please watch this.
And I'm a freelance game programmer, and in this movie, you were inspired from Super Mario and Metroid and Rockman. I am so proud of it, and as a Japanese. And my question is, could you tell me what kind of about recently Japanese? What do you think about the recently Japanese game?
Is it what is about Japanese games that inspired us?
Recent.
Most recent Japanese
I'm sorry.
They suck. I'm sorry. Like, you guys need to get with the times and make better interfaces and like update your technology. We're totally kicking your ass. At then, you guys are the king of the world, but your time has passed. I'm so sorry.
Did you look at his face? Look at what you did, Phil.
I have a more specific game design comment that is
So hateful.
in,
Are you swoop in and be constructive?
No, this is well, I mean, I don't like Japanese games either. The thing that I don't like about them, all the modern ones that I've played, except, you know, like Dark Souls and Demon Souls and stuff, is you sit down and the game treats you like an idiot, right? Like, you have to click through like 700 little boxes telling you how to do everything. There's this idea, so Western game designers, and I'm only familiar with the game design dialogue in the West, but old school games like adventure games had all this random stuff where you had to read the designer's mind, right? And at some point we understood, oh, things have to kind of make sense for the player to expect to get through them, right? So we have to train people on our game mechanic, and then the rest of the game can be expanded out from that initial training, right? I feel like Japanese games take that too far, and Japanese games feel like it's illegal to ever let the player do anything that has not explicitly been shown to the player in painstaking detail earlier in the game. And what that does is it kills the joy of discovery. And that's the thing that I really value about games, is when you figure something out that you haven't been shown, right? And when you show the player everything, you're turning it into an exercise, and it's an exercise that's kind of insulting, because of course I can follow the exercise, you told me what to do, right? And then they make me click through so much bad dialogue. I mean, Western game dialogue is terrible also, but at least we hit spacebar and we can like skip the whole cutscene or whatever. But when they come in and make you hit A, yeah. Okay, cutting it off there. But a more
nice
politic way of
translation.
saying what Phil was saying.
I mean, I think everybody would like to go back to that you just pop in and you start playing and it's an adventure. Like how, I mean, that's all of my childhood memories.
I think that Zelda games should just start with a prompt that says, "Have you played a Zelda game since 1996?" And then you can skip the first 45 minutes to 2 or 3 hours.
Now, of course, before this goes up on blogs and stuff, right? There are exceptions, right? There are Japanese games that are different from that. But the trend, you know, just like the trend in America is like, you know, soldier looking down a gun sight, you know, shooting dudes. It's the same feeling.
Street Fighter 4.
Yeah, Street Fighter 4 is pretty good. Yeah.
You see what I mean? These people who have since gone on to mostly do nothing of note, Jonathan Blow, by the way, hasn't made anything good in a long time. Phil Fish, even, if you don't remember, he quit video games after getting butthurt and then cancelled the sequel to Fez. The only one here who still kind of made anything of note is Edmund McMillen. But again, these people showed how they believed that they were superior to this Japanese developer who is still working in games and making many hits. While the majority of the people that were on that panel are either not in the games industry anymore at all, or have just faded into obscurity because their future games were met with muffled reception compared to their initial breakout hits. The hubris of the Western mindset placed up against that of the Japanese is still, like I said, unfortunately rearing its ugly head. Those devs said that Japanese games suck, yet Japanese games have overwhelmingly won Game of the Year many times at the biggest award shows back then and even more recently too. Elden Ring, Sekiro, hell, even Astro Bot, all made by Japanese devs. Let's not forget how the entire industry is currently being held up by Asian devs specifically too, and how regularly these westernized games have either failed or been ignored outright. But when I listen to that clip, I can feel the hubris from those game developers permeating to the same people nowadays who attack Japanese people who say that Shadows is racist and intolerable of their culture. But it isn't about being tolerable because they never cared, much like the Ubisoft employees I showed you all being raked over the coals for various acts of awful abuse that they placed on their own employees. It was never going to be something that was genuinely respectful of the source material or the traditions. That same hatred for Japanese video games, culture, all of it is still alive and well. And it is, don't get it twisted, definitely racist even to this day. And whenever someone says, oh, it's not a big deal that the shrine can be desecrated, just know that if their mosque or synagogue could be equally destroyed, these people would blow a gasket. I think that's the biggest lesson here that I've learned personally from covering video games for so long now. That these Western developers and their fans for well over a decade now still believe that they are somehow superior to their Eastern counterparts, when the East has completely and rightfully overtaken them for years at this point and left them to pick up the pieces. But I truly do believe that this same hive mind mentality of West is better than East is still alive and strong in the most delusional of culture war soldiers that will downplay any criticism thrown their way when it comes to not just Shadows, but even stuff like Monster Hunter and more. They just can't fathom why their games aren't doing as well as they used to because places like Ubisoft are just like Jonathan Blow, or that Phil Fish guy who rage quitted and left the industry years ago. They truly believe that in their own hubris that they were indeed the future of gaming, and that whatever they made would sell and win all the awards. But these kinds of developers, besides Edmund of course, have all pretty much faded into obscurity to various degrees. Guess what? His re-release of Braid, it sold like crap, and good riddance. And let's be real, most of you probably don't even remember or know who Phil Fish even is, or Jonathan Blow, besides people like myself, who mostly just know these people as a cautionary tale and less as talented game devs. Look, striking lightning in a bottle is great, but the real trick is what you do after that bolt dissipates. And in the case of Western game development, they never truly reiterated or moved past for the most part with what they've done already. Every Ubisoft game is the same thing that they've done for years. Far Cry hasn't evolved since the third one. Assassin's Creed's big overhaul was just to make worse versions of The Witcher 3 that they still can't meet in terms of quality or polish or writing. At what point do we stop and just admit that these things aren't working and you're not an idiot or any other buzzword when you call out the complete lack of respect and diligence of these westernized creators and the executives who funded them? The sheer hubris of these types is why their side of the industry is falling apart at the seams. And when I look at Assassin's Creed Shadows, all I see is a game built from the ground up about a culture these types kind of already loathe. And the complete lack of care on display is proof enough that maybe, just maybe, these Western devs never really cared about the people of Japan, their culture, or their customs, and it all really was, just like those corrupt executives, an excuse to enact their power upon those beneath them, and they were so power drunk, they thought you would be stupid and let them get away with it. But what do you think about Shadows, of the accusations, of those Western devs saying what they did versus what we know now? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, subscribe, and I'll see you soon.